Welcome to the Homeschool Mama Support Group. If we haven't met, I'm Teresa Wiedrich. I am the certified life coach and homeschool mentor that you can find here every Tuesday at about 2:15 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Also, I'm found on Instagram, the Homeschool Mama Self-Care account. I have a podcast that gets released every Tuesday, except for the next 2 weeks. The podcast players. I write at capturingthecharmedlife.com and various other places around the internet. But ultimately, I'm here to support you to shed what's not working so you can show up in your homeschool and your mom life authentically, confidently, and purposefully. So I'm glad to have met you. So on today's episode of the Homeschool Mama Self-Care podcast, I was chatting about simplifying our homeschool Christmas experience because in my experience, that is not usually most people's experience. Even this morning, I was chatting with a mom who was telling me that though she is trying very hard to enjoy the details, the experiences of this homeschool season, it just gets ratcheted up. I forget her exact words, but there's a lot more energy. There's a lot of expectation around what we're supposed to do, what we're supposed to buy, where we're supposed to be, all the things. And then there was this one element that also got introduced, and it was, I know that I have a Christmas wish list. It would take me a bit to think about what the wish list would be, but even if I put it in front of my partner, would that partner or that significant other actually honor it and listen to my desires or wants? Because it's me that's used to doing all the things for Christmas. So I addressed that conversation point in the Homeschool Mama Support Group on Patreon, but I share the 10 steps to simplifying your homeschool experience, your homeschool Christmas, on the podcast, Homeschool Mama Self-Care. I hope that that is encouraging to you because that is a lesson that I have learned the long, hard way. I don't like simple. It's not my default setting. I like creativity. I just really love the energy of doing new things and exploring new things. And this homeschool life is cut out just for my homeschool mama heart. It's an ideal approach to living, and it has encouraged my kids' curiosities. It's encouraged mine. And I love making things interesting. So simplifying has been the long, challenging journey for me. But I share with you a few, 10 specifically, steps where you can simplify your homeschool Christmas. If you haven't already checked out the 12-day self-care challenge for homeschool moms, it won't be here for very long. I reserve to keep this self-care challenge to a very specific timeline where I know that it can be appreciated, especially right before the Christmas season. So if you're curious about that, just say self-care challenge or something like that, and I'll make sure to get the link to you. We're just on the cusp of the 5-day vision challenge being released. The 5-day vision challenge is encouragement for you to clarify how you want to show up in your next homeschool year, or how you want to maybe pull back some of the things that you were doing, maybe recreate a few things, and be more intentional with your purpose and your goals in 2024. If I don't get a chance to tell you this, I want you to know that you're invited to a specific group coaching intensive that I have every year, 2 days after Christmas. And because I'm going to go radio silent in the next week or so, I won't be in the Facebook group and on Instagram posting things for about 2.5 or so weeks. I'm still in the Patreon group. If you're over there in the Homeschool Mama Support Group, I'm still doing my coaching conversations. If you are one of those people that are engaged in coaching with me, if you're curious about getting coaching conversations started with me, certainly I'm available for that as well. When I think I'm trying to create a bit of a bubble. Should I use that word? Probably not. Anyways, the energy of quiet for the Christmas season and for all the activities that my family and I are going to be doing. It's going to be a shift of gears for me, because if you've been around, probably since November 2019 is when I really got busy in my business. So I've been indirectly coaching for a very long time, but I have been intentionally coaching since November 2019. And I don't know that I have ever taken a week off social media since then. And that, my girl, okay, that's how I usually speak to my girls, that, girlfriend, is a very long time to be on social media. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break. And though I absolutely love supporting you and encouraging you, inspiring you to just get clear on why you're doing what you're doing, every element of it, I need to take a break. So I can feel the need, and this is the time, a perfect time to decompress for myself and allow my creativities to flow and think about what might be most beneficial for you in the upcoming year. If you have thoughts about what you think you would need support in over the next year, let me know, because this is definitely when I spend a lot of time thinking about it. Also, next, that group coaching intensive, that is really something I've done for solidly a dozen years. I first found a book called The Not So Big Life by Sarah Susanka. And when I read that book, I discovered that there is a much simpler way to live. And that was part of the big impetus for me to simplify my life. But that book has a series of questions at the end of the book that have compelled me every year to reassess how I'm going to do my next year in all the different areas of my life, whether that's in my coaching realm. Obviously, I haven't always been formally coaching as a homeschool parent, but as a homeschool mom, I would reconsider how I was going to do my homeschool with each of my kids and how it was actually working, or whether it was working for the first few months, and what we would take into the upcoming year. There were things like I knew I was moving into the slump season. And so then I had to really gather strategies or intentions towards myself to deal with that slump season, which I found quite challenging between January and about March in these parts. It's pretty dark in these parts around that time. And I've heard that from many as well. You have different names for the slump season, but certainly this is a challenging part of the homeschool year, the January to March slump months. And that's one of my goals in that group coaching intensive as well, is to come up with strategies to deal with the hard stuff. Of course, I'm going to go deep into things like your identity, who you really are, and who you really are, how that manifests in what you do. So identity and purpose, those are big components of what I discuss frequently in my coaching conversations. Funny enough, many people think that I'm just staying into the realm of homeschooling, and though there is a strong overlap in how I want to encourage you to lean into child-led learning so you can help your child live their lives on purpose, I also strongly want you to live your life on purpose. And this has been my story. And of course, in coaching, I'll have a lot more discussion about my story, but this has been my story, that as I allowed my kids to move into the things that matter to them and to lean into the things that mattered the most, I also naturally was looking at myself going, what do I want? And how do I want to frame my life? And as you and I both know, this whole mothering journey thing is kind of demanding. And some days it is really hard to see that you are a separate person from your kids, especially in the early days, or that you have needs or interests or an entire life and identity outside of each of those kids. Because we don't actually, because often, especially as homeschool parents, we don't have that life and identity outside of our homeschool kids. So we're going to talk about all those things and clarify all those things and plan for all those things in the upcoming 2024 Re-Envision Your Homeschool Mom year. That's that group coaching intensive that I'm going to be offering December 28th. If you're curious, let me know and I'll get you a link where you can check out more, or else you can also ask me questions. So today I had two questions that I wanted to discuss. There's two new members. Welcome to the group. Brooke and I don't know the first name. M is the initial. And do you know what? That's actually the initial of one of my kids, and sometimes we call her M as well. So assuming that there is more to this name, I'm just going to go with M for right now. But so welcome to the group, Brooke. You had shared you presently have one sixth grader enrolled in an alternative learning program. You're no longer I am no longer her teacher, but she only goes to a school about 60% of the time that a regular program takes up. Homeschooling a fourth grader too, and hodgepodging pre-K for my 5-year-old who also attends an afternoon play-based preschool. Right in the thick of things. Sounds like fun. That's from my perspective when my youngest is 15, so I've got a very different experience than you right now. But it does feel like yesterday, and even though it was intense at times, it was fun. So you also shared I need to get my 5-year-old into a homeschool rhythm. I would like routines established so when it's time to start kindergarten curriculum with him, that we have good school table habits. He's not the best listener. I also feel like I'm spending time on the wrong things. My fourth grader's neurodivergent and needs explicit, in-depth curriculum to learn the basics, and he also attends the school district parent partnership, and I feel like I'm not spending time on the fun stuff. Story of a homeschool mom's life, for sure. Okay, so where to start here? Let's see. I think the first thing that I think about, what you're specifically asking about, is your 5-year-old, your kindergartner or almost kindergartner, and trying to create a homeschool rhythm. I think that very much depends on what else is going on in your home. So if you have a couple kids that are requiring you to move around or to get into the van and plan for activities in the day that are outside of the home, then your actual routine is going to be different. But as I've said many times, for many homeschool moms, you get to decide what's important to you, what matters to you. If you're homeschooling, you have so much potential freedom. And I say potential because it doesn't mean you're going to take that freedom. We instinctively want to move into that schooled approach to a home education, and there are some benefits to it. But the disadvantage is that we tie ourselves to activities and processes and curriculum and ways of doing things that aren't necessarily serving our kids, and we don't have to. We do it a lot, but we don't have to. We can embrace more freedom in our home education. So if you know that you're going to be leaving at a different time every day, then write it down. Write down what are the most important things for each day of the week. I'm going to guess that there's a predictability in what you're doing for each day of the week. So I would use colored markers, use a time audit, which you can access. If you would like one, just ask me for it. I have a time audit, which means an opportunity for you to write down all the activities you're doing to discover where you are spending time and how you're spending it. Do you want to spend time there? Is there a lot of time wastage? Also, there is another approach, and it is called time blocking, which I would encourage you just to grab a very simple template from somewhere online. You can get this free easily. A time blocking template where for each hour of the day, use a different colored marker, shade in what you're doing on that part of the day, and determine what you want to include. If there are things you don't want to include, either don't do them, farm them out to somebody else, or ask yourself, why do you need to do them even though you don't want to do them? For me, that was sweeping. Really, for me, it's Probably it's house cleaning in general. And so I'm kind of on the cusp of thinking maybe it's time to get a house cleaner. We'll see. This is a debate. This is a discussion. But it's something I'm thinking about because I don't want to invest the time in that anymore. And I have so much time used in various ways that it really is not my top priority. Having said that, sometimes it acts like self-care for me. Yeah, really, it does. Because it's a time for me to listen to podcast episodes. It feels like I'm cleaning things, that I'm kind of washing stuff away, and so it's kind of cleansing in a way, to a certain extent. So sometimes there's activities we don't want to do, but we want to do it for a specific reason, like occasionally have a tidy, clean, organized home. So that's good. The goal is to discern which activities have value, that have meaning for you, how much time you want to allot to them, and then actually block them into a time block or into a schedule. Use a colored marker. Give yourself lots of margins, because margins as in space around the activity, because getting kids in and out of the house takes more time than you think. Getting to town, if you're far away like me, takes more than 17 minutes in the winter. There are various things that you just need margin around. So when you have looked at your week and you say, okay, well, every Tuesday afternoon, I'm going to go grocery shopping. Every Wednesday afternoon, I have piano practice for this kiddo. Or there's the pre-kindergarten program here. When you actually look at that, then you can ask yourself, how much time do I actually have to do the more formal activities? Unless, of course, all your kids were home and then things were a little more predictable, then you could actually say, okay, from 9 to 10:30, we'll do more formal type activities. I'm giving you an example of what some people do. I don't think there's an exact prescription of time. Okay, so but actually on that thought, when we're having a conversation about a kindergartner and how to create a rhythm for a kindergartner, I would say always less is more. If you know that that kindergartner is not someone that likes to sit down and hang out at a table and do book work, or they don't like to sit down for very long without getting fidgety, take that as a hint that it's not a resistance that they don't want to do learning activities. It's that they are not ready for learning activities. And even if you're like, yeah, maybe not, but I want them to sit down and do it anyways, I feel ya, been there, done that. And I learned that it wasn't as effective as I would have liked to tell myself it was. Being consistent and teaching like internal discipline or rhythms or routines is super useful for everyone, every human on the planet. But really absorbing things and learning things doesn't happen just because you sat a child down to do something. It doesn't happen just because you tested a kid and they did really well, aka, I don't know, 75 to 100% on a test, whatever you think is really well. They're not learning just because you're doing learning activities. We can have conversations endlessly here. If you've watched me before or you've had conversations with me, you know I'm about to go into a discussion of deschooling or leading into child-led learning. I'm going to do a group coaching program in the early parts of next year on deschooling. So I will leave it right there and just say that less is more with a 5-year-old, and that a routine can be created when you decide what matters. I'll leave a couple posts or podcast episodes about routines and kindergarten and creating rhythms below. They hopefully will be useful for you. Good school table habits. I would love to hear what you think that means, or what you remember that to be for yourself when you were a kiddo, or what that's like for your older kids. Probably you know what I know. 3 kids, they're all very different, and they do things very differently. You said he's not the best listener. Yeah, that. So I'm going to guess if he's not the best listener, maybe there's another kiddo that is. Let me guess. The firstborn? I was the firstborn. Anyway, I wasn't, let me see. I also feel like I'm spending time on the wrong things. Yeah, that's what I was meaning about spending time doing the things that matter. How do you know whether you are spending time on the wrong things? I would love to have a conversation with you about that. If you're interested in coaching, definitely let me know, and we will have a conversation about that, because that question actually helps you if you can get clear on what the wrong things are, or the right things are, or the things that matter are, then I can help you let go of the things that don't matter. Let's see here. I did have a conversation with Diane Geerlinks in a coffee chat in the last week or so, and you can find that discussion about learning challenges, so neurodivergence in the homeschool life. You can find that on YouTube in the Homeschool Mom Chat playlist. You're not spending time on the fun stuff. Welcome to homeschooling, because that is so easy to do. I can't remember how many fun moms I've met over the years, but I'll just say disproportionately there are fewer fun moms than serious home educating moms. And if you are in the fun camp, whoever you are, then I would ask you, what's fun and how do you make it fun in your homeschool days? What do you do to make, include the fun in your homeschool days? And for this homeschool mom, Brooke, welcome to the homeschool world, because learning to incorporate fun is, I think, both a self-care strategy and a really useful tool to gain connection and create memories and enjoy your homeschool. And it's a necessity, not just for your kids, but for you, especially over the long term. I hope that was helpful. Brooke, love your name. It's one of my girls' middle names. I'd love to hear more. If you're curious, you're welcome to connect with me. So M, you're in, yes, you're up. Welcome. Very, very cool to have a chat with you. Where you're from is where my husband was saying, I really want to go there to visit. So you said you're a homeschool mom of 5 kids, 11, 10, 7, 5, and 10 months old. And you just found me on Instagram. Well, nice to meet you. The snow just fell. So it turns out I am not in the same mountainous region as you are. I'm in Western Canada, but we also have many trees and many mountains. And I was wondering why, as I said to my husband, so what's the draw specifically there? Oh, you tell me. Why should we come visit you? That was a quick invitation. Okay, so you're struggling between unschooling and having a more and better scheduled day. Yeah, that's kind of like what I was talking about just now, isn't it? Although Brooke wasn't sharing that she wants to unschool per se. Makes me think. If I was coaching you, I'd have a conversation with you about what's your end goal? What for each of your kids? And I know that that's tricky because a couple of your kids are actually quite young, and you got a lot going on. But I would ask, what's your end goal in home education? What do you specifically want for each of the kids? What do you believe in education to be? The root word of education is educato, which means to raise up. What are we raising up? You are raising up 5 specific children. And those 5 specific kids are very different energy needs. They engage learning differently. I believe they have a different reason, each of them, to be in the planet or on the planet at this time. And so they have different purpose. And though we don't get an open book to what their purpose is and what they should do when they're 18, 25, 62, 91, if they have that many years, we don't have a plan for that. We don't have an open book, but we do notice certain things. Like my son, my youngest of 4, always has been a builder. He's always been curious about building things. So he's really useful on the homestead. I mean, his natural instincts are really helpful for me. He's created, barn gates. He's created makeshift chicken coops. He brought me home a cutting board, a beautiful cutting board from his woodworking class. He's done all sorts of things over the years. There are all sorts of Lego builds and, you name it, he's built things. And I saw him doing it very early on. In fact, one of the first things I saw him do is playing with a chessboard. I thought it was cute, took a few photos. He was probably about 6 or 9 months then, just barely sitting, playing with chess pieces. And by the time he was 3, he was legitimately winning me. And even though I joke often that's a sign of how not capable I am to that game, which is true, he was actually doing quite well at 3. By the time he was 8, he was winning games against my husband, winning bets against my husband, and he's surpassed my husband in the last number of years in technical skill. And he always had those interests, and I saw those emerge ever so slowly over the course of time. I have seen many different things with my other 3 girls as well. I was just at a Christmas party this weekend, and one of the moms, who is a younger mom than me, had said that when they were at our home for a Christmas party a number of years ago, that I had shared with her that that I'd said something about how her experience of labor sometimes manifests in what or is revealing what your child is like. That was my experience as a postpartum nurse or labor and delivery and perinatal work. I noticed that there was a trend in how we experience our labors, how we experience our babies at the early phases, and how they stay the same over the course of time. And I have definitely seen that with my own kids. I'm curious if that's your case too. But anyway, she was saying that she sees things early on. And I too saw things early on. And I think that's what we need to notice with our kids in their learning opportunities or their curiosities, their creativities, their natural tendencies. We need to notice what they're really fully engaging in, because whatever they're fully engaging in, they are definitely learning. And if we can harness that energy or that intention in all the different things that matter for us, that matter in our educational approach with our kids, then we're really giving our kids an advantage to live purposefully, because we are noticing who they really are and what they need right now in order to learn how to communicate, aka writing activities or presentation activities or learning their letters, whatever level of communication learning they're in. We can notice what do they need to learn so that they are able to be confident, capable consumers in arithmetic. Perhaps they're really interested in algebra, and maybe they really want to move into calculus and they want to go into an engineering path, or who knows. You're probably not going to see that when they're 3, but every step of the way, if you're paying attention to who they really are and offering them opportunities that suit who they really are, then they're really learning. And I think it is so valuable to lean into that mindset shift. I remember moving from a very classical, very traditional homeschooled approach in my 3rd or 4th year into a full-on unschooling for about 6 months, because I'd fallen in love with John Taylor Gatto, both in the written word, not literally. And I had taken lots of their precepts and decided that's it, we're never going to homeschool again. I said as much to my oldest daughter in a Starbucks, and 6 months later I could see that actually, no, I don't actually want to, fully unschool. I could tell that my oldest was served by that approach. Overall, it was useful. My second daughter was like, I'm kind of bored. And I could see my 3rd and 4th, everything academic seemed to come naturally to those 2. And I put so much less emphasis on my younger 2 than my older 2. All of my kids are smart, okay? I'm going to say that because I'm their mom, but it's true. It's actually true. And I could see that they were all very intelligent, especially in different ways. But the two youngest, everything just seemed to come so simply. Was that just because they were the two youngest in a homeschool of four? And that's what happens when the youngest homeschoolers just absorb everything and learn and assume routines and rhythms early on? I don't know. But it was just so natural for them. But I could see that the second, third, and fourth really wanted more routine, more structure. And also, I wanted it. It wasn't just them. And when I talk about this, I'm reminded that the unschooling methodology or philosophy very much encourages hands off in the truest, purest forms. And for many years, I would refer to myself as a classical unschooler because I knew that the way that I was approaching things wasn't the cleanest, purest approach to unschooling. And now, because I've been writing about all these things for 2 decades, and I've been coaching and podcasting and writing intentionally for you in the last few years and really clarifying what I think about all these things, I can see that any methodology is not useful, not in itself. The methodology is useful as a description of the methodology, but not for a specific child. If we can use different elements of whatever method we come across that we like, if we can use tenets of that methodology for the purpose of enjoying and harnessing the homeschool life that we want, that matters for our child's education and for our end goals, if it serves our end goals, then we should do it. And if it doesn't, then we don't need to subscribe to unschooling or classical homeschooling or literally any methodology, because why are we? It's just trying to laud and applaud a methodology, but we're trying to homeschool our kids. And so homeschool your kids. Use whatever methodology you want. The key is to ask, is it working for you? Is it working for your kids? Is this consistent how you're doing it day to day? Is it consistent with what you want long term, your end goal? So those are the things that I would share with you in clarifying how you want to do your homeschool. I hope that helps. Let's see if I have anything else written down here. I do see you said, I just have a conversation with you about when you share, I would like to have a more and better scheduled day. What does that mean? What exactly, specifically, would make it a better scheduled day? I love to have that conversation with you too. You share you would like to get your dreamer, your kiddo, to do schoolwork without nagging. Food for thought. Does nagging help your child get their work done? Like, does it, oh, this is not going to work. Does nagging actually help your child? Does it actually really get them or your child to learn? Is it possible that you could do like bite-sized chunks of learning, perhaps over the course of the week? Depends on which age child this is. I'd be curious how old this child is, because, an experience of a 5-year-old versus an 11-year-old, very different. And what is your expectation of the work, as I shared earlier with Brooke? But I know from experience how easy it is to nag and try to insist, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And it's not that what you're saying isn't important to your child. It's not that what you value isn't important. It's more, but is it actually working to nag? Is it actually getting you anywhere? Because in my experience, it usually means that a child is eventually going to become resentful of you, that there is this deep sense of, could you stop already, Mom? I don't want to do this. Just don't make me do this. So then I would look at a couple of things. I would say, okay, what's your relationship like? What's the content of the relationship? Does the child feel like they have eyeball to eyeball time and feel connected to you? If they don't, there's likely going to be trouble. Also, is your child really capable to the task? Is it possible for you to do smaller bite-sized chunks of whatever it is so that you can be fully engaged? One of the best pieces of advice I remember getting at a homeschool conference in my early years was to do really short bursts of things. So especially when it came to math is what this this discussion was about. Doing 15 minutes at a time, not trying to do an hour long math lesson, but rather short little chunks, short teaching sessions if you are actually in a teaching process and not just, independent kind of learning, but 15 minutes. And when you start to lose them and they're not interested anymore, then stop. Come back later, come back tomorrow. But when you continue to try to force something, it doesn't get them to learn it. It might make you feel like you're checking the box off, which I totally understand that feeling. And then, yeah, I did it. But for what purpose? Like, really, for what purpose? You have this beautiful homeschool freedom, and, we all want to use it, except we don't. We have an opportunity to embrace that freedom, to help our children truly learn at their pace, to have a customized education. And I can only imagine that with 5 kids, it feels a whole lot more busy than perhaps my experience, certainly my experience right now with a mother of just 1 kiddo at home. But just lean in, as I say, to child-led learning. Lean in to noticing whether your child is done, and lean in to fully engaged learning instead of, we're going to do these things because somebody told me this was a good idea. This textbook, this workbook, these pages, this literally anything. I think I'm going to leave that there. So lovely to have this conversation. I think there was one other gal, Lucy, that I was going to address. Lucy, nice to meet you. You said you love homeschooling. I would love to hear about you and your homeschool journey. And you're here to make friends. Well, guess what? I just absolutely love, even though I'm not in the thick of homeschooling anymore, I love chatting with the homeschool moms in the Homeschool Mama support group, getting to know various people from around the world, various methodologies that they ascribe to, and very much different kids, obviously. They come to homeschooling for different reasons. They have different worldviews sometimes. There's so much diversity, and I just find it so interesting. And if you are interested in making friends, then join us this Friday, because at 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time in the Homeschool Mama support group on Patreon, we're going to have our annual Christmas tea. We're going to talk all about what worked for us this last few months, what we're hoping to shift toward in the next number of months. We're going to talk about unrealistic expectations around the holiday season. We're going to be talking about our favorite tea, all sorts of things. So if you're just curious, the first 7 days of this Patreon support group is free, so you can just come and say hi. If you have been wondering about it and this isn't the first time you've heard me share it, but you're like, well, I'm curious, but if I come, then I'll feel beholden. You don't have to feel beholden. I get it. Sometimes people don't really feel like they fit. That's okay. You don't have to stay. But it will have been lovely to have met you anyway. So if you're curious, definitely join us. I'll leave the link below as well. I hope everybody is having a lovely week, even though this is the busiest week of the year. And I wish you happy holidays and Merry Christmas. And I look forward to seeing you in 2024. We'll talk to you soon.